Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience this evening. And again, we welcome you to our Wellness on Wednesday workshop. I think our technical difficulty is another indication of why this particular topic is so important. As as difficult as it is that it may be to lose time due to a technical issue, it's even more hurtful when we lose money as well because of some nefarious activity. And the more and more we are using our technical devices, unfortunately, the more vulnerable we are becoming to those who would target us through scams. So we're grateful for this opportunity, another Wellness on Wednesday workshop, where we're able to partner the spiritual community with those who are professionals in very practical areas. So tonight's topic is Scam Alert Preventing Scams workshop. And so thank you again for joining us on tonight. Again, we welcome you on behalf of our pastor of the World Missionary Baptist Church in North Charleston, South Carolina, Pastor Isaac J. Holt Jr. We are also grateful for the leadership and stewardship of that vision through the work of Sister Cleo Brown and others on the Wellness on Wednesday committee. So with that being said, let us go and begin our time together in prayer. Let us pray. Eternal God, we are grateful again for partnering those who are professionals in these particular areas. We thank you for your words that say that where there are a multitude of counselors, there is safety. So Lord, as there is so much going on in our world, we thank you for those who stand guard and who have insight and wisdom and expertise in these areas. And thank you for their time that they may share it with us, that we may be protected, not only from your hand, but also from the words and information we will get tonight. So bless this time, bless those who gather, and we thank you for all who come together. We thank you for this time again. In your name, in the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Well, blessings to everyone. It's my privilege to introduce those who are gathering tonight to lead us in this time of information gathering. Some of you who use a particular carrier service for your phones, you may have experienced a technical difficulty, don't know how it happened, why it happened, but certainly we see more and more of it happening. And to know some of the background information to help us understand how we can protect ourselves, I think will be more and more important as we go forward in the future. So with that being said, let me introduce our presenters tonight. First, we have Mr. Hedrick Cintron, and he is a seasoned IT professional who has spent the majority of his career at Networks Plus, a managed service provider providing a one-stop solution for the IT needs of the local governments and small businesses. At Networks Plus, he provided disaster recovery, systems administration, network management, cybersecurity training, and other IT services. He has also previously served as a hospital network administrator at Goodfellow Air Force Base, and currently Hedrick serves as a major in the United States Army Reserves, where he manages the non-tactical vehicle fleet and leads the electrification project. He has also managed several IT contracts for installations and services throughout his military career. And prior to that, Hedrick spent 6 years working in law enforcement, serving on the Traffic Investigation Unit, Crime Scene Investigation Team, and Sniper Unit. Hedrick has demonstrated his expertise in IT with certifications that include Microsoft 365, Modern Desktop Associate, Cisco Certified Network Associate, and Certified Continuum Command Specialist. Mr. Cintron, we are grateful to you for being with us tonight, and we look forward to hearing more. We also have Mr. Sharif Ben-Gura, and he is a graduate in computer science. He is a PhD candidate in artificial intelligence, and certainly AI has been in the news very much recently. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that topic. And he has a focus in AI and computer vision. He is the founder and CEO of A Plus Capabilities. He is a cyber warfare officer in the Army Reserves, has certifications in Security Plus, CEH, CCNA, AWS, CISSP, and Sharif is passionate about innovation, cybersecurity, and leadership. And I'm sure he'll tell us all about what those acronyms mean. I'll learn a lot just by knowing what all those letters mean. So it sounds like you also have a wealth of wisdom that you can share with us, certainly around AI topics. So, Mr. Bangura, we're grateful again to have you with us. And then we have Mr. Andrew Parker, and his journey in the IT industry began as an officer in the United States Army, where he managed a range of IT projects and implemented cybersecurity measures. One significant project was setting up a tactical communication site following the 2010 South Korea Xi'an naval ship incident, which underscored the importance of reliable communication in crisis situations. So Andrew's career in the military also allowed him to work with senior officials, which helped him to refine his leadership and interpersonal skills. After leaving the Army, he founded JU, if I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, JU in 2015, which is a tech startup aimed at aiding small businesses. He used his savings and funds from friends and family to get it off the ground, showing his dedication to his entrepreneurial journey. When JU needed improvement, Andrew took the initiative to learn multiple programming languages and rebuild it in 2018. As a first-generation college graduate, military officer, and entrepreneur, his journey has been filled with learning experiences that have shaped his leadership style and technical skills. So, Mr. Parker, we welcome you as well. Thank you all for being here. And as a reminder to our audience, I'm sure there will be many questions. I already have a few, but many questions from our community. And we remind you that you can put those in the Q&A function of our platform, and we'll be able to address those as we go further in our time tonight. So we welcome everyone. And with all of that said, I'm going to go back and turn to Mr. Cintron and ask you just to share with us from your perspective some of the things that you believe we ought to know, maybe even some of the reasons that you got into this field in the first place. So please take it away.
All right. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me to be here and giving me an audience to speak to about this topic. It's great to be out here and great to be amongst these panelists, great people. So how I got into the field, I got so many stories about how I got into it. I couldn't tell you all of them, but I could tell you some funny ones. And really, when I was over in Afghanistan, I had some friends that were in the IT department doing a lot of really fun, simple stuff. And while I was outside in the heat, dragging hot tire irons and moving a lot of heavy equipment, sweating myself to death, they were inside in the air conditioning playing video games. That signaled to me that I had the wrong job and I had to switch over. So that's really what got me into the IT realm. And then from there, I started hanging out with them and started learning a lot about network security, networking, getting on the firewalls over there, and then working on my certifications for when I got back, switching over. But seeing as a panelist has a diverse experience in cybersecurity, it's probably a little better that I jump back on my law enforcement background. Because during that time, I unfortunately had to deal with a lot of scams. And most of the time, those scams are directed towards elderly and people that really just don't know any better. And that is, like I said, the elderly and immigrant populations, people that might not know our laws uh, and might not speak our language. Um, and you've seen it. We all see it. If you have a cell phone today, you're probably just getting random text messages to your phone saying, "Hey, you probably got a bill that's overdue. Click on this link to pay it." You're getting a bunch of trash mail at your mailbox, telling you to sign up for this or check this thing out. And you're getting a bunch of emails in your mailbox, a bunch of spam. And for most of us, we've seen so much that it doesn't phase us anymore. We know that if we don't know who the sender is, we just delete it. If the spam filter isn't catching it already, we just know to throw it away. But that isn't always the case. Sometimes these scams start becoming quite convincing. Um, People start phishing and using social engineering to find out who you are, what you do, and use that information to build a profile on you. We find out who Frank Harris is. We find out what church he goes to. We find out where he is purchasing services for this church, right? And then we're going to start sending him these fake bills to mimic or to convince them, hey, maybe you do have an overdue bill that got sent to collections, give us a call. And then some of these things start looking like they're a little more real. And what's funny about this is today we're sitting here on this call and I get an email. And let me go ahead and share my screen real quick because it's not really a good attempt. And I think you could probably see my screen here. But here's an invoice, and it's obviously a terrible attempt, but it's a scam email from Geek Squad. And most people that see this will probably know, unless you're using the services or have used services from Geek Squad, which is like the IT customer repair at the Best Buy, you probably know, hey, I don't use them. I'm just going to delete this and I'm going to throw it away. But for those that possibly have gone to a Best Buy or used their Geek Squad before and maybe frequent them, and they get an email like this, they might be more inclined to read through and think that they have a bill here. But there's a lot of things that you can see on here to identify that it's a fake email. The first thing that you'd probably notice here at the top is any legitimate business that's sending you information is not going to use a Gmail account. They're not going to use anything that's going to have the domain ending at Gmail. They're probably going to use Geek Squad, the gsquad.com or something that they actually have to pay for. They're not going to use a free Gmail account to send it to you. When you're looking at the actual text that's here in the body, it's not text at all. You can't highlight any of this information. Matter of fact, if you click this, it's a picture, it's an image. It's not real. All this, when I click on here, I can actually drag it around. So you can't highlight any of this stuff, which is another indicator that there's something kind of weird going on here. Most of the time, these templates actually have text in there. So if someone's sending you a picture like this, it's probably just another indicator that it's weird. And of course, if I know I didn't purchase anything from there, I know it's not real. And then there's no link back to the website. There's no identifying information in the body saying my name, my address, maybe the last four of my credit card number or account number that I actually purchased that's identifying me. There's just this phone number, right? And of course, if we call this phone number, then it's just going to be some scammer and then we got to deal with them. But these are the type of things that we have to look out for. And in my experience, and I was a police officer in the Kansas City area, and I have dealt with this. And I have dealt with this exact scam, and it had to do with a Best Buy and it had to do with a Geek Squad. And what happened in this particular instance is the person was a elderly female, ended up calling the phone number and speaking to a representative on the other line. they worked overseas or they were based overseas. They had a very thick accent. And they told her, hey, you owe this money for services that we rendered to you that were already rendered. She had already paid. And she thought that she still owed money because she has gone to this Best Buy service there in their area, probably 2 or 3 months before. But she thought this was some type of overdue service, and they were able to convince her that she still owed money. Uh, but some red flags is, they're telling her that if she wants to pay, she needs to go to the Best Buy or to a local store and pick up some green dot cards or some type of prepaid cards. Anyone that's ever asking you to fill up a prepaid card and not pay over the phone using an actual debit card or checking account or anything like that is usually a scam. It's that no one's ever going to ask you to use a prepaid card to pay for anything. It's usually because they don't want their banking information to be traced. It is very common. And like I said, so we're talking about it today. I got this email earlier today. If you look here at the top, you could even see that the email isn't even addressed to me, right? So here's my name. I'm in the blind carbon copy, which probably means this got sent out to hundreds, thousands of people. And the only person on the to line is this random person up here. I'm in the blind carbon copy, so you already know it's not intended for me. It's just a flooded email. So just something else to be aware of. And most of the time when you see these types of emails, your Gmail, your Apple, your Microsoft emails will probably give you a notice at the top saying, hey, you might not trust this domain, or they can't prove the authenticity. But just some things to think about there. But it's the same thing that you will see when you receive letters in the mail. So we see a lot of things in email, but things that you receive through the snail mail, as we like to call it, through the postal service, can be just as dangerous. So reaching back from my experience, I've also had to deal with scams that are coming through the mail. And a lot of times it could just be people that are down on their luck and they were surfing the classifieds, just looking for a job. And they find advertisements for a stay-at-home job. Maybe it's paying $15 an hour to do something like drop shipping, where they receive packages at their house and they ship them somewhere else, or they're doing administrative assistant work online for some random person. But in order to start the job, they need to set up their electronic account first. And as they go through the interview process, they go through the hiring process, they'll get a check in the mail and they're told to deposit this check. And what happens is once they deposit this check into their bank account, that triggers the scammer on the other side to drain their account. That right there, I have seen at least 10 times in my 6-year career, resulting in over like $50,000 just gone. And it's sad because we get the FBI involved and we get the task forces involved. And fortunately, because a lot of the banks kind of help them out and refund a lot of that money. In some cases, they don't, or it just kind of depends on the bank if they're going to give them the money back. Some of these banks are kind of stingy and they'll say, hey, you shouldn't have deposited this and it's kind of on you. In most cases, they got their money back. I use USAA. They're pretty good on things like that. They can identify a scam from a mile away, and they're very, very helpful. But just things like that just happen very frequently. And it's just good things to watch out for. And what we find out is that these scams have been happening forever, and they just keep getting more and more and more sophisticated. And with the introduction of AI, and I don't want to jump into anyone else's topics, but with the introduction of AI, it's just going to be harder to detect, and it's going to be harder to protect yourself. So unless there's any questions, I don't know if there's any questions just yet. I could just jump into this PowerPoint real quick.
Sure. Well, as you jump into it, I do have one question. You mentioned early in your discussion that somehow these persons or groups or whoever they are can accumulate information about us. They can know where I shop, for instance, some of the other things you mentioned. That triggered my attention. I'm wondering, to use this kind of illustration, how can we cover our tracks? How can we protect ourselves if there is a way? How can we be more careful so that those persons out there don't have the ability to accumulate that information about us? Are there ways we can do that?
I think Andrew might hit this, and it might be jumping into like the social media realm.
Gotcha.
But we as people have to be able to sanitize what we put online. Everyone's got a Facebook, Instagram, or some type of online presence. You just have to be aware what's on there, and what we read and what we see. And my suggestion for most people is every now and then, Google yourself, see what's out there, see what you can find out about yourself, and find out if there's something out there that shouldn't be, and then go ahead and take it down, delete it. I know a lot of people like to overshare, things like that. If you got your full date of birth out there, you got your home address out there, where you work, if you're always posting your locations and things, it's just oversharing is not always a great thing, especially if you like to make enemies. It's not great. But if you are determined to be someone that has a substantial amount of wealth, or are a easy target that has something of value, it's really not too hard to start going after you. And when we start going into this home computing thing, and even in cybersecurity, when you're trying to do this social engineering type stuff and break into passwords and people's computers and things like that, the more information you as a user put out on the internet, the easier it is for me as a person trying to hack or do whatever it is to get into your system using those details. If you got a password and then I just check where your password hint is, and your hint for whatever reason says my favorite food, right? My favorite food, the street you grew up on, your mother's maiden name, and then I check your Facebook profile that's public, and all that stuff's right there on your about, right? I'm in. So it's just kind of things to think about.
Oh, great information. Thank you.
I don't know if Sharif or Andrew, if you guys wanted to add anything in on that.
Well, Ms. Central, I don't want to jump ahead. Did you mention that you have a PowerPoint slide or any other information you'd like to share at this point?
Oh, you know what? I thought it was still sharing. I'm sorry. Let me.
We still see your the example of the fake receipt that you shared with us.
Got it.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Awesome.
Okay. There we go. There. I'm sorry. And just did anyone want to piggyback on anything I just said there?
I'll make an addition to that. Thank you, Mr. Hendrick, for that. You're right on point. Everything you said was right on point. Just in addition to that, I was looking into the open source, right? Like you mentioned, how much information do you give out there? Really, it's about, because if somebody came to you and asked you, a random person came to you and asked you, oh, what's your date of birth? You'll be worried about that, but this is information you also give out there publicly to people without even them requesting it, right? They say the greatest feature in the internet is the share button. Once you hit share, then you can't unshare a lot of things, right? And people like to, sometimes maybe it's because of boredom, or sometimes because they don't just know. So they share a lot of information that's not even asked of them. And they don't only share their information, they share their kids' information, people around them, you know. And if somebody was trying to attack me personally, they may not be able to get me, but they try to get people around me, right? My friends, and once they get my friends, so my neighbors, my family, then they can indirectly get me. So we just have to be cautious in how much information we share. And I get it too. It's hard because, like, when you're job seeking, they ask you for so much information. Sometimes, like, some URLs, you put your resume in, and then once you start applying for the job, they ask you for more information and more information. So you give in more than the required information as well. So it's really difficult, but we just have to be cautious, as we use technology. That's all.
And what's funny about it, you're talking about the people around you, right? We're all proud of our kids if you have them. I might be oversharing a little too much about how proud I am about my kids and their accomplishments and all that stuff. So I need to watch out on that. Now that I'm thinking about it, right? Posting too much on them and all the great things they're doing. But I just got a couple of slides here. It just kind of helps me think about things. Safe home computing here. Cybersecurity, not really much about cybersecurity. I'll let Sharif talk that. We'll skip here. So I already hit email. When we're talking about mobile devices, and really what I want to talk about is being safe at home and home computing. And when you think about your cell phone is a computer, and you got to treat it like a computer. Everyone should have some type of password on your computer and a way to locate it when it's gone. It's pretty simple if you have a Apple device. If you have an Android device, I know I frequently use Find My Android. That was a great one. But there's various different ways to find your phones, to include Tile. That's a great one. If you lose it using a computer or another device, someone else's phone, if you lose it. But what's most important is to protect the information that's on your device using a password, using fingerprint reader, using face scan that's on there. And then on top of that, be aware and cognizant what information is on that mobile device. Just remember that on most phones, you're storing credit card information, banking information, your personal information, your emails on there. Your entire life, for the most part, is now on your cell phones if you got one. If you got a smartphone, your whole life is on that phone. Passports, plane tickets, where you live, all your bills, records of everything you've done for years, and to include all your location and GPS data. So if you think of it like that, it's something that you should secure and know how to have different applications downloaded on that phone so you can control the phone remotely from a different device if you ever need to. For example, if I ever lose my phone, I'm able to wipe all the information on there if it gets stolen from a different device, to include, if I need to find it, I can find it. If I need to find my wife's phone, my kid's phone, we can find it from my computer, their phones. But, if I need to, we could just wipe all the information on there and just go down to the store. And if it's me, I'm gonna get an iPhone 15. If it's my kids, they're getting a flip phone because they're too expensive, right? Um, we're talking about work websites on here, complexity of life. A lot of this stuff is probably going more into the cybersecurity stuff. When we're talking about mobile devices and your home computer, you have to be able to know how to segregate the information, your personal information on your computer, from your work information. So a lot of people, you'll probably using your personal computer and device for personal reasons or for personal use and your work use. So there's different ways that you can use virtualization or different applications through Windows to separate that stuff if you need to, or your business might have some enterprise systems that just keeps them separated like that. But when we're talking about basic security on your computing device, we already talked about the passwords on the phone, but we need to talk about password security on your laptop itself. So no one should ever have a laptop or a computer for that matter, desktop, that they open up, turn on, and then it just goes straight to the desktop without having a password that logs into to log into the computer. Because then anyone can hop in and access all that information. It doesn't happen too often, but if someone were to break into your home, if someone were to steal the device or steal the laptop, then they have access to all the data that's in there. What's interesting, and this is really for Windows users, and let me hop in here and share my screen. I know a lot of people are used to just using the normal password, but if you're using Windows 10 or Windows 11, you can now use something that's called Windows Hello. And if you were to hop into your search bar down here and just type in hello, it'll give you this option here called sign in options. And it's a more secure way to secure the information on your computer, because the computer itself is going to use a password to log in. And then once you use that password, say my password to the computer is Frank Harris is #1. That's the password to the computer. I get in there and then I set up this Windows Hello. And if you're looking at it, if I could get this out of my way here, if I set up my password, I could come into Windows Hello here and it'll give me these options here. It'll let me sign in using facial recognition, just like my cell phone. I could use a fingerprint. I could use a PIN, 3 or 6 digit PIN, a security key. I could use just my normal password, or I could use a picture password, which allows me to set up a picture on the screen and I could just click a couple different points on there. And really what this does is it allows me to sign into the laptop using a different method than the password that's encrypting all the information on my laptop. The reason why this is good to use is that if I'm in a public setting, you might find out what my PIN is, but you won't know what the password is for the computer. Or vice versa. You might know what my password is. Somehow you might know what my password is, but you won't have the PIN or the Windows Hello information to get into the computer. And that's just additional security for the computer itself. It's free. It's there available. Everyone should be using this. I use it myself. When I log in here, I do not use a password to log into my computer. It uses a Windows Hello PIN. And then when I need to use a password, it prompts me to do changes and stuff. But this Windows Hello is the way to go. And then there's a second thing that's in this exact same place that everyone should be using, and that is called Dynamic Lock. That is right down here. And what the Dynamic Lock is, it pairs your cell phone, and you don't have to do this. I recommend you do it. It will pair your cell phone, whether it's an Android or it's your Apple. Well, I think specifically it's for your Androids. I'm not sure if the Apple phones do it just yet, but it will pair your phone up with the computer. And what it does is anytime you walk away from the computer will detect that you're outside of the Bluetooth range, and it will always automatically lock your computer. Just an additional safety feature. It's free. It's awesome. It's amazing. It also gives you a bunch of other features, like lets you make phone calls through the Windows computer. It lets you see your phone screen. It lets you operate your phone through here and control everything that's on your phone. You can consider, when you're using this dynamic lock or the Windows Android as well, as a way to essentially use your computer monitor as a cell phone screen. So just two little tips here while we're here that I wanted to get out there. That's pretty great. I loved it. Great security features. And again, all you have to do is in the search bar, if you have Windows 10 or above, type in hello in your search bar, or go into your Windows menu and just find Windows Hello. And you can do that all from right there. Right. Sorry for the tangent.
That is a lot of great information, and I know it's very helpful to our community. It's helpful to me, and it's already generated several questions that we'll be able to come back to toward the end of our discussion tonight. And I would just want to make sure that we give space to our panelists, our other panelists tonight. Are there any closing thoughts at this point, Brother Cintron, that you would share with us as we get ready to transition to Mr. Bangura?
Yeah, I think the last thing, and probably the next to most important thing when you're looking at things is, and I'll just show this real quick because it is important. Anything, if you guys are annoyed about Windows updates, they usually come through every Tuesday. It's probably the most important thing that you can do. But it's not just updating the computer. When you're doing your checking for updates, the thing that you also have to do, and you could already see that I got some pending my restarts over here. Every Tuesday or every Wednesday, Windows will always come out with an update that you should always apply. And you should always do that. That's your first line of defense against everything. But if you're applying your updates, usually always come down here to advanced options and then check for optional updates. That's the last thing I'm going to say. Whenever you apply Windows updates, go into advanced options and optional updates, and then see what's down in here. And the reason why I say that, these optional updates is what's going to make all your third party and peripheral equipment that's hooked up to your computer, such as printers, mouse, keyboards, video gaming equipment, all that stuff. That's what's going to make those things work with the Windows updates every week. So if you update your computer and something is broken, go into your optional updates, update that. It's going to save you thousands of headaches over a lifetime. That's probably one of the number one IT issues that I run into at all times, is that right there. But other than that, I could wait till the end and we'll answer some questions later.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Great information. And I think that's a great place to transition to Mr. Bangura, because there's some helpful things I think we need to know about AI. It's been in the news so much recently. So looking forward to hearing more about that from your perspective.
All right, Reverend Harris. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Hendrik. That was a great one that you just gave. So segueing into that, artificial intelligence, it's not new. It's really been around since the 1950s. Started at MIT, but it's just a growing field. It's advancing exponentially quite recently now. It's growing really fast with the advancement of technology. Because humans rely on more assistance, right, in technology. So we look at AI from a less technical standpoint. You look at AI as your best friend, a very smart guy in class, that you rely on, to give you answers, to certain things. if you don't want to study hard. That's what artificial intelligence is, right? It learns really quick, it learns faster, and it detects certain things that a human may not detect. Like when humans, we take breaks, we're sleepy, we get emotional about things, whereas artificial intelligence doesn't have those features. They don't get tired. I mean, they have their cons, but for the most part, they operate at a scale beyond human recognition and the human cognitive abilities. So it goes into like smartphones, social media, online shopping, just things that we use every day, right? That are non-complicated, streaming services. People have used smartphones for a while now, since like the early 2000s to now, right? And there's a lot of AI behind those two. Like people use Siri. You want to ask Siri questions, that's a model of AI. It's a model of artificial intelligence. You say, hey Siri, play me a song. It does it. That's you asking for efficiency from a machine. You ask for Google Assistance. The GPS, is a form of AI as well. Most people use GPS, they don't use maps anymore, right? So we're giving a lot of autonomy, a lot of power to AI, which is a good thing. So you treat it as a friend. It's a good thing because it's helping a lot. Because back then, when there were maps, maybe there were more accidents, right? And people get lost more. But this generation, we use a lot of GPS to navigate around, and we use AI to do that. And that's a form of AI. Siri helps a lot. The Google Assistants, you go into forms of social media, right? You see how you're on Facebook and you have suggestions on Facebook, right? You have some friends that you haven't seen in a long time, and you make one friend, and then it suggests other friends to you. Sometimes you're just talking about certain things, and then it starts appearing on your search. It's appearing on your screen and things like that. Those are forms of AI because it's learning your patterns, it's learning your speech, and things like that. Streaming services, right? Look at Netflix. When Netflix learns your pattern, the movies that you watch, the platforms that you're more keen to, then it learns that. It makes it easier for you. So it knows that, oh, okay, well, Reverend Aries likes movies like this, so I'm going to make it easier for him. So I'm going to just send him movies that are related to this genre. Same with music, TV shows, YouTube channels. It happens to me. Sometimes I'll be browsing, I'll be checking on YouTube, checking different sites. And then, as I go, I find related items on there. And quite recently, we're seeing vehicles like automated cars now. It's a big deal. Those are forms of AI too, because we're giving assistance to artificial intelligence. So those are all the good things. I think even a home now, they have a robot called Roomba. It's a vacuum. So it vacuums around the house, so you don't have to do it anymore. You don't have to walk around if you have back problems, if you're just tired, you're coming from work. So Roomba, it's an AI technology. It vacuums the house. Those are advantages of artificial intelligence, because sometimes people hear AI and it's scary to them. Like, what is this? It's dangerous, it's scary. But there's a lot of good things to it, just like the cell phone. There's good things, but there are also cons. It's how you, the user, control a lot of the things. Like about 80% of the harm you can control. It's how much you share to it, right? How much information do you share? Like Mr. Hendrick was saying, how do you prevent certain things, on your computers? How do you take your time and not trying to be lazy and actually take your time to say, okay, this information is important to me, so I'll keep it. I'll invest some of my time, put some sweat equity, and learn some things, right? So that's a form of it. That's what I would talk about AI. Unless you have questions right now on artificial intelligence.
I think you just answered one of them that I saw in the Q&A function, and it talked about how afraid should we be of AI. And what it can learn about us, or who has access to the information that's out there, that I think we've touched on somewhat. So I think that that question touched on the emotional component, new things that are out there, things maybe we're not familiar with. How leery should we be? How fearful should we be of all these new things that are in front of us?
Right. We shouldn't be fearful at all, because it's inevitable. It's here to stay. So it's how we interact with it. You know, it's our interaction. How safe can we be? And most of the safety is up to us, right? Because AI is there. It doesn't have life, but we give it that life, right? We give it the information. You tell Siri about everything that you want, and Siri keeps that information, and it uses it as in your advantage or disadvantage, right? So it's really up to you, the user. You should not be fearful. You should just have good cyber hygiene, right? And cyber hygiene, if I segue to that, is basically having good practices, and using technology, right? And it could be things very simple, very, very simple, like password sharing, right? Like when somebody asks for your number, I've seen people, I ask for somebody's number and they give me their phone. You're giving me your cell phone that has your banking information, you're giving me your cell phone that has a lot of critical information to you, so, but that's not the intent, right? The person gave me their cell phone so I can punch my number in, but you don't know who I am in the first sight. I could just go and click on your location and try to turn that on, turn certain things on, start certain services that I want access to. And then later I can put my number in, right? So that's something you have control over. You have control over certain things, like I've seen people just randomly ask for somebody's hotspot, like, hey, can I have your hotspot because you want to connect to the internet, but when you give that you access somebody's hotspot, you're also giving that person access to your device, right? It depends on how credible they are and who they are, what's the integrity is, and what their intent is towards you. Because you've just given them access to your critical information, right? I've also seen cases where people, their phone is about to die, and they say, oh, can I plug my cell phone into your computer? But this is your cell phone. It has a lot of information. Sometimes it even has, it has your medical information on it too, and so it's how critical that information is to you and what you know. But a lot of these things you don't, it's not just the user's fault. It's how much information that's up there for the user to learn. So for organizations like this, what you're doing right now is incredible. You're sharing a lot of information to users, right? Because some people don't know. Like if somebody was to came to my house and asked me for my password, to log into my Wi-Fi, they're doing it out of their ignorance, right? They're not doing it just because, they want to give me their information, right? So how much information is there to the public to learn, and then they can use that information, at their advantage is the important thing, right? So if you know, then you don't use it, at your advantage, then that's the problem. You're muted.
I have to learn to use this technology myself, obviously, but we will certainly circle back to much of the information you've laid the foundation, and there's some questions that are presented in the Q&A that I think we can delve further into. But I certainly want to give Mr. Parker an opportunity to share from his perspective. Obviously, a lot of entrepreneurial energy that you have generated in building your business. So we want to hear more from your perspective as well, Mr. Parker. And again, thank you for being here.
Hello. Thank you, Reverend Harris, for having me. And thank you, Sharif and Hendricks, also for giving this your valuable information. For me, I'll try to keep it more brief. I'm going to focus more on giving an overview of scammers and phishing. I have a PowerPoint to go over to do an overview of that. Let me go ahead and okay. Yeah, again, I'll go over scammers and phishing attempts. And here's some stats for scams in 2022 to just kind of give everybody an idea of how rampant it is. These are stats from the FBI directly. Americans lost $10.3 billion in 2022, and this is just reported. So imagine all of the victims who didn't report that they were scammed or had their identity stolen, things like that. They had over 2,000 complaints to the internet, to the IC3, which is a place where people can report scams per day. As Hendrik mentioned earlier, elderly folks tend to be targeted by scammers. They alone lost 3.1 billion. When it comes to call centers, these folks are half of the victims, and they represent about 70% of the losses when it comes to phone scams over the phone. Just to go over some of these common scams, you have scams like lottery scams, something where you may be contacted by a scammer saying that, hey, you've won a certain amount of money. In order to receive that money, you have to provide some information for them to send it over to you. And next thing you know, you may have some money missing from your account. I won't go over all of these. Investment ones are pretty common. Cryptocurrency scams are a big one when it comes to investment scams, where you may invest a certain amount of money and for a upfront with a promise of a return, and then it ends up being a scam, and you don't get anything in return. Consumer schemes are one are things like losing your credit card or going to a bogus website, a fake website where you may make a purchase. For example, you may see something on Facebook or Instagram, and you make an ad, for example, potentially, and you may click on the link, and it may be a bogus website, and you try to buy a product, but the product never comes. And next thing you know, you may have your credit card information stolen, and you may have lost some money there as well. Elderly folks, that's actually listed as a category on the FBI's website. So these common scams were also pulled from the FBI website, but they are heavily targeted because they often are polite, more reluctant to get folks, scammers off the phone, for example. And oftentimes they have a lot of money saved up that scammers go after. I'll also just point out like ransomware. So that's also becoming more and more popular. And that's if you click on something on your computer, or download an attachment or something like that, and that document or PDF file may have some ransomware software or a virus on it. And that software can sit on your computer for days, weeks, or months until it's triggered to encrypt your files. And what that means is it can lock your files, and this can be your documents, important documents, pictures, videos that you will no longer be able to access. And then you may see one file that you can access, which will be a letter from the scammers demanding that you pay them money in cryptocurrency so that you can have access to your files. I believe that in 2022, there was like $34 million Americans lost from ransomware. Some of the things that you can do to kind of recognize scammers, you can, oftentimes if you're contacted by one via email or phone number, they'll use pressure tactics or have a sense of urgency where they will try to get you to commit to something right then and there. They don't want to wait for another day or something like that. So that's a red flag. Things are often too good to be true. And if that's the case, then, you'll have to be the judge of that. But if it is too good to be true, you have to consider that it may potentially be a scammer. Additionally, if people are asking for your sensitive information, this can be credit card information, account information, home address, social security number. You need to be very skeptical of that. Some of the signs are, for example, poor spelling and grammar. A lot of these folks who are scammers are employed over internationally, India, Russia, China, etc. And oftentimes you can tell that their English may be a little off. Two other things I'll mention here is you may want to, if you are considering engaging with somebody who may potentially be a scammer, you want to verify their contact. If they're saying that they're from a company, it's okay to call the company, i.e. if they're saying they're from Bank of America and they want you to do something with your account, you can call Bank of America and kind of try to verify their contact and see if, this individual is actually reaching out to you. Let me go ahead and move on here. Again, preventing scams. I mentioned some of these a little bit earlier. So, being skeptical, trying to verify identities before you send over sensitive information. One thing I'll mention is two-factor authentication. So passwords, when you use your passwords, passwords aren't very secure, as mentioned by Hendrix earlier. But there's something called two-factor authentication, which I do all the time now, where if you log into a website like your Gmail, for example, you can set it up so that every time you log in, they send you a text message to your phone with the code. That's highly recommended now. They have other ways of doing that with multi-factor authentication, where you can download certain apps. Microsoft has one, Google has one, where you can download. And what happens is, instead of having a code sent to you, these multi-factor authentication apps will generate codes that, for example, expire every 60 seconds. And you can use those to log into websites that you may deem very important to you, like your banking website. Those are typically pretty secure. So again, just for that, you use your password to log in, and then after you log in, a code will be sent directly to you if you're using two-factor authentication. And that process can only adds like 15 seconds on top of your login. One thing, also checking your financial statements to make sure that, someone hasn't stole your credit card information or something like that. I use mobile apps for all the banks that I use, so I can quickly check my accounts whenever I want, fairly easily. And also they send me notifications if they suspect suspicious activity and things like that. The last thing I'll say on this one that wasn't already covered is, credit cards, if you're purchasing something online, is generally better to use credit cards versus debit cards, because debit cards do have some protections, but most credit card companies have extra layers of protection when it comes to fraud, as well as refunding. They're usually a little bit quicker to refund if you have your credit card information stolen. Okay, so I'll generally talk about phishing now, and so phishing is basically the most common internet crime reported since 2022. As you can see here, again, some more stats: 500 million attacks in 2022. And again, elderly folks are, suffer pretty large losses when it comes to this. I won't go over this too much, but basically, email, if you're phishing, well, let me first take a step back and say what it is. So phishing is when somebody they pose as another entity, whether it's somebody that you know or another company, and they'll contact you posing as them, trying to get you to give them some information. Your sensitive information, i.e. credit card information and things like that. They can do it over email, SMS, or phone calls nowadays. Some of this is very similar to scams. It's identifying phishing. Again, if there's a level of urgency, unnecessary urgency, that's a red flag. If it sounds too good to be true, it's a red flag. Generic greetings, for I believe the email that Hendrix shared earlier went out to everybody. So if the email doesn't address you by your name or something like that, especially if it's coming from a reputable company, that's also a red flag. Looking at the email and the specific email address, seeing how that looks, if it matches the company's URL in certain scenarios, things like that. I have a couple example of emails here. And to me, these emails look pretty legitimate, but like this one is talking about a failed delivery attempt. I've seen these type of emails a number of times. Here it's pretty hard, I think, to identify that this email is fake. But if you look at the address is the address, email address is kind of off. And then again, it says dear, so it doesn't even, there's no information that says your name or identifies yourself. And there's a little bit of grammatical errors here, but failed delivery attempts are common. Banking, emails saying that, hey, there's issues with your bank account, that's common. As Hendricks showed that he receives today, Best Buy, this is a common one with a order number. Getting locked out of your account, or false emails saying that you're locked out of your account. Here's one from Microsoft. And then here's some promotional emails that are actually phishing emails as well. Avoiding phishing scams, or I'll go through this pretty quickly too. This is very similar to avoiding scams, I think. Always verify the source if you're going to deliver your sensitive information. The biggest thing for phishing emails is you want to be very careful with the links that you click. If you click a link, it could potentially take you to a fake website, or two, it may end up somehow downloading code or downloading software on your computer, the malicious software that you don't want. Opening attachments from unknown sources or suspicious sources is also very dangerous. It can definitely that's definitely one of the main ways of getting software on your computer. Using email software like Microsoft Outlook, keeping your computer updated, that can also help. And then for me, like if I see emails that are obviously spam, I wouldn't even open those emails. I don't know if you open emails, scammers can actually tell that you've opened emails. And what they can do is, what that helps them do, although just opening emails is not going to lead to a virus on your computer, it can let scammers know that, hey, this email is active, and they can, continually harass you with scam emails and things like that. So that pretty much wraps up my portion of the talk.
Well, hey, Andrew, thank you so much. A lot of great information, a lot of great reminders, and it just seems like you had a pretty extensive list there. I would imagine that you have to keep adding to that list of things to be aware of as these scams become more sophisticated. There are several questions in the chat, and we'll just reach out to each of you to respond as you would like to. Going back, there's some questions around law enforcement, and when it's noticed or we see these scams out there, how are scammers tracked down? How does law enforcement find these scammers? And some of you mentioned that some of these scams can originate from overseas. So one of the questions, or a couple of the questions in the chat, were around how does law enforcement approach that aspect, and how often are these scammers caught and brought to justice? So maybe Hendrik, with your law enforcement background, you can speak to that.
So it's difficult because this crime, if you think of it, is competing with every other crime that's out there. So unless you have a reasonable lead, enough evidence, and a suspect and substantial loss, is there really a reason to go after this crime? Or are we just going to take it down as information and then just track a trend? So in several cases that I've seen, where we had mail, some of these scams that came through the mail, people would report it, we'd take the mail, we'd dust it for fingerprints, see if some of the fingerprints might come back for hits. We would scan the information, maybe see if any of the phone numbers or anything pop up online. If nothing came back, if there were no leads or anything, that would pretty much be the end of that investigation, unless a suspect was developed. And in a lot of those cases, there was no loss. No one lost any money. there was an attempt at a crime. Now, where you have crimes where the criminal succeeded, now there's a little more detectives might get involved to try to get that money back, or at least help them try to get um, the victims get some of that money back through different funds or through their financial institutions. But it's the same thing. If there's no leads or any way, any IP addresses that we could trace through any companies, any ways to pull that information through warrants. Because if we have IP addresses or find out that they're using different businesses to run these scams, now we have a way to pull information. And if they're paying for the services, now we got leads. We have paperwork to track down. We can force information to come from there. And now we can track locations. Where the issue comes is we'll hit a dead end where if it's out of our jurisdiction, now we have to convince someone else somewhere else, hey, are you willing to help us? And if all we have is, hey, someone somewhere over there stole some money from someone over here, how likely are they to help us? So, and that's what we ran into a lot. So unless we were on our end, unless we were able to do almost all the work and find out who did it and where they were at, it was very difficult to go on the other side and catch them. Now, one thing that we ran into all the time that we were pretty good at catching were skimmers. And that was when someone would put skimming devices on like gas stations or ATMs for credit card skimming, because there was cameras, there was fingerprints, and we were able to videotape and get license plates and see where those credit card numbers were being used. And you would get additional camera footage, additional tape, more license plates. And a lot of those were very successful at catching those types of crimes because now we got video evidence and we got leads. And then it'll go into other jurisdictions and we could show them, hey, this is the guy we're looking for. Here's his picture. Here's his car. Here's the money. We can prove loss and we can see where they're at. So it really just depends how much information we can pull together in these cases. That's kind of the answer, you know? And again, it's a competing crime where every police force, every law enforcement agency has other things going on. So if everyone in the agency is working some crazy murder that just pops up, this is going to be on the back burner for whatever reason until we could get the manpower back to work this. And hopefully we get back to it. Yeah.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. Sharif, I think you spoke to AI, and one of the questions, if Siri or Alexa, some of these devices can be considered to be AI. I know we talk on those devices all the time, and they answer the questions we're putting out there. So they in a way, they get to know us. And one of the questions asked, when you talk to Siri, how are they learning everything about our likes and dislikes, and who has access to all of that information? If I say to Siri, hey, I need to buy a box of cereal, where's the best place to go get it? Who would have access to that, for instance, kind of information that I'm putting out there over Siri, over Alexa?
All right. Am I live now?
You're good.
All right. So that goes back to what Mr. Cintron had mentioned about the settings, right? When you purchase a device, it's not just you purchasing it and starting to use it, right? It's how you secure it, for your safety, right? You go into those settings, disable certain features, like location, disable the sharing mechanisms of it too, so it doesn't share out. Because sometimes, they have default settings, the companies that sell these devices, without naming the companies, what they do is they need the data. They need the data so they can improve on their services, improve on building their technologies, for the consumption of the humans, for us, so they can learn the patterns and make better business decisions, right? So it's up to you, the buyer and the user, because you've already bought the product, it's not yours, right? So you go there and disable some of those default settings, right? So that's one way you can do it. And also, those devices should not run 24 hours, right? You should not have Alexa run 24/7 in your house if you're not using it, you know, because you may be speaking on the cell phone, it's listening as well. You know, you're not talking to Alexa, you know, but it's still on, the device is still on, right? So you may be talking about other information, about sensitive information, social security, you know, your kids' birthdays, you know, you're just saying it out of just joy, right? You know, talking to somebody else. You may be sharing your banking information, right? And if a nefarious user gets into, like a hacker, right? That's maybe your neighbor, or just a bad guy around the block. They get into your home Wi-Fi and they can have access to just one device, which is the Alexa device. Right now, that's gonna be used as a backdoor to listen to every other thing that you do, and not just you, everybody else inside the house and everybody that comes in. So one of the first things you want to do is, you know, go into the settings and try to disable some of the features, some of the sharing features that it has, right? And also turn off, you know, the device when you're not using it, right? So those, does that answer the question?
I think so. It makes me want to jump up and turn off my Alexa right now. But yeah, I think that information is very helpful. And it echoes, like you said, some things that were shared earlier about going into whatever device we're using and looking at those settings. That seems to be one of the most efficient barriers we have control over. And,
Right.
and I really appreciate the comment about not having our devices like Alexa on 24/7, not having it on when we're not using it. So great information, great information. Andrew, I want to pull you back in, and there are a couple of questions in here. You mentioned the targeting scam, the scams that are targeted to particular groups. And one of the questions talks about our elderly community. How are scams? How is AI? How do scammers target especially the elderly community, and what should the elderly population be especially careful about?
I can make some general comments on that, and Sharif and Hendricks, please feel free to jump in if need be. But so I know that, like I mentioned before, scammers, they have their ways of trying to identify folks, and there can be many different ways. But if they have identified somehow elderly folks, they can try to gauge them via email or phone calls. And once they do communicate with them and verify, hey, that this person, you know, may be elderly folk, they're highly lucrative to them because one, oftentimes elderly folks may not be very tech savvy. They may be more trusting, and like I mentioned earlier, more polite to scammers or salespeople, for example, maybe less likely to cut some of these folks off and will entertain them. And when they do identify elderly people, they, you know, it's oftentimes it'll be a prolonged scam, i.e., they'll contact or communicate with them over a period of time to try to build more trust, to try to get them to do things. Some of the more common scams are, i.e., lottery scams, romance scams, which I didn't mention. You know, maybe folks they may be looking for a significant other or something like that. Investment scams, and then again, oftentimes elderly folks may have more in savings and more money to potentially spend, and again, that's something that scammers are highly attracted to. So I would say to watch out for is, you know, be you need to be, if you're contacted by a stranger, you need to be very skeptical when they're trying to get you to do things. Anytime they ask for money, for your account information or something like that, those are red flags if you don't know them. So it's something to be very skeptical about. I don't know if you guys want to chime in on anything like that, but does that answer?
I think so. I think that gives us a clear picture of what to look out for us. And I'll just throw this out to all of you on the panel tonight. A couple of questions. This is something many of us use at least once a week, and that's at the gas station. And it was mentioned earlier, I think, about the cameras that can look at where a credit card is being used and track down individuals who have targeted victims. So a couple of questions and I'll just kind of group these together and let you all respond as you would like to. One question that says, when you purchase something, is it best to use your PIN number or a credit card? And a lot of times we get that question at the gas station. Do you want to bypass using the PIN number, or should you use your credit cards? And someone touched on it earlier, the difference between using a credit card and a debit card. But the specific question is talking about when you purchase something, is it best to use a PIN number or to use a credit card? And anyone can share as you would like to.
I think it's Cedric. For me, and for what I've seen, it kind of depends on your financial institution, right?
Okay.
So for me, I'm fine using a credit card or the debit card, because I know either way, if either one of those things are going to get compromised, I'm going to get my money back, and then I'm going to get a new card, and then I'm going to change the PIN. What we're starting to go to now is just that tap to pay, where you'll tap and then it's just going to ask you, at least for my debit card stuff, it's just going to ask you for the PIN number anyway. And then I don't know if it's the same for a lot of people. My credit card actually has a PIN on it anyway. So I'm using a PIN either way. And I see it as a additional layer of security along with that chip. But a lot of people, if you're using your phone as a tap to pay, those cards that are stored on there are usually, when you're tapping to pay, it's using a virtual card number on there to store that information. That kind of makes it a little bit safer. So even though the phone itself has the information for that debit card that's presenting to you, it's actually transferring a different card number to that service to make that payment. If you're ever thinking about, what if someone skims or tries to scam NFC device on the back of your phone, it's actually stealing a different number from that phone. Once we start getting to that issue in the future, it's stealing a different number than what's on your credit card or your debit card. I see that being a safer alternative going forward, now that we're starting to see that everywhere.
All right. Thank you so much. And any other responses to debit cards and using the PIN or bypassing the PIN, debit versus credit?
Well, Hendrik is right to that. And in addition to it, there's also barcodes now, right? When you go to a restaurant, they tell you to scan, or you go to any payment center, shopping center, you have barcodes that you scan with your phone, in order to get the menu, or just some advertisement, they say, oh, scan here to do this, but you do have an option to have the hard copy. The thing about it, it's not bad, it creates an ease of use, but as a user, with those barcodes, they're bad people out there that go in there and put their barcodes on top of the legitimate one, right? So when you scan, you're double scanning. So you're scanning into somebody's server, right? So if the bad guy gets that, so they can use that information against you. So what I usually do is I try to, use my finger to scrape the top of the barcode to see if anything is on top, right? Because in a restaurant, the restaurant owner or the restaurant may not be a bad restaurant. It's just that maybe they may have a bad employee, right? Or somebody that goes there to eat and they look at that barcode and they stamp theirs on top of it. So now it becomes a threat, to just a user that goes in. So just be cautious about things like that as well, in addition to credit cards, in addition to payment methods.
All right. Thank you so much. Just one more quick question, and I apologize that we didn't get to all the questions, but we can perhaps send these out to our panelists and have the answers posted on our platform with the Royal Foundation. But I would just like to circle back. I guess this is bringing it full circle. Early on, it was mentioned being careful about how much information is shared on our social media platforms in the first place. So I want to circle back, and this was one of the first questions that was presented. And so if once information is shared, how much ability does the user have and what is out there? Or in other words, once it's out there, is it gone and it's in the public domain and there's no way we can retrieve it? Or if I'm explaining the question well, in other words, once information is posted on social media, for instance, how much control at that point do we have on whatever is out in the social media realm? And I don't know who wants to field that question, or is it just being careful in the first place about what we put out there? And maybe that's the takeaway.
Certainly, there are ways that you can share information out, right? It's just difficult, right? Because the share feature is the greatest feature. Once you send out things, then you're giving unlimited access for dissemination of that information. But Google is the biggest search engine, right? So one of the ways that you could limit that is deleting accounts, because you have a Google account. Most people have Google accounts. So going into those Google accounts, into your Gmails, and replacing your Gmail accounts with new Gmail accounts, and before you do that, you make sure you go and scrape off data, right, from the old account, right? And another way is to clearing your search history, because most times you just search www.xyz, but you leave those you store all of those searches there, and people don't go back and delete. But every now and then you go to that, you go to your search history and you should clear it out, clear out your cache. That's how you can get away from certain things. That's one way. And deleting specific Google service data as well, right? Like photos, because when you Google yourself, like Reverend Frank Harris, right? It only gives out what you put in, what majority of the time, right? If you have a LinkedIn information, that's what's there. If you have certain information, it's that's so it spits out what you give it. So when you go backtrack and you delete certain search operations, behind the engine, that helps.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all so much. I'm grateful, and I know many of our attendees are grateful as well for the information that we've been able to receive, and hopefully we all feel safer because we've gotten this information and we know some practical steps we can take to protect ourselves and protect our families as well. So, hey, thank you all so much, and we really appreciate you. And thank all the persons who joined us tonight. We look forward to our next Wellness on Wednesday. Coming up should be on the fourth Wednesday in August. And so we just look forward to once again joining together in this community where we will continue to hear from voices, very knowledgeable voices like we've heard tonight, who can help us on our journey. So we just appreciate you. Thank you so much, Hendrik and Sharif and Andrew, and blessings to you. From an Air Force veteran to the Army contingent on tonight. We appreciate you. All right. So blessings to you all. So with all that being said, we just invite anyone who would like to just share in this moment of prayer. We will close out as we give thanks for this discussion. Let us pray. Eternal God, thank you again for knowledgeable voices and expertise. Thank you for gifts in our community that join in this fellowship. And we pray your blessings upon them and their work and their endeavors. And we thank you for our church and faith community and those in the larger community who are more equipped because they've taken the time to be with us tonight. So thank you that you are with us at all times and continue to keep us forever in your care. Thank you for all you do this day and forever.